The Nike Free Metcon 6 versus the Nike Metcon 10. I am going to try to keep this video under 10 minutes and make it as efficient as possible for you all so you can choose the model that's better for your training context and needs. So 4 major differences to note between these shoes include number 1, their midsoles and how that's going to feel on the foot when it comes to comfort and for your training. In the Nike Free Metcon 6, we have the free midsole. This is going to be a lot more flexible throughout the forefoot and midfoot. This material is also a softer foam. So when it comes to shorter jogs and walking and just daily wear, but then also some HIIT training and whatnot, this midsole can be a lot more forgiving. Now back here in the heel, we do have a slightly denser foam, but comparatively speaking to the Nike Metcon 10, the Nike Free Metcon 6 will give you a slightly softer ride. You also have a bit more of a heel bevel back here, so if you are taking classes or using these for short interval runs, they will feel a little bit more seamless compared to the Nike Metcon 10. In the Nike Metcon 10, you have the React foam that runs throughout. Now, compared to the Nike Metcon 9, this shoe does have a little bit more responsiveness and flexibility up here in the forefoot. So if you're primarily in your forefoot doing cross training, any form of power focused movements or strength movements, you shouldn't lose stability too much in this model despite it being a little bit more flexible. But where this model is going to differ from the Free Metcon 6 is just the overall density and stability. Back here in the plate, you also have that TPU Hyperlift insert. It's going to give you a lot more stability when you're lifting, but take away from some of its running performance and jumping performance. So if you want that shoe for primarily lifting, CrossFit, and like more athletic focused cross training, so a lot of jumping through the forefoot, the Nike Metcon 10 can be a great option. But if you want something that's a little bit softer that you can also rock out and about for daily wear, even for traveling, the Nike Free Metcon 6 could be the move. The second major difference to note is their upper constructions and how that's going to translate to breathability and just general lockdown and security. In the Nike Free Metcon 6, we have a mesh upper with synthetic overlays, and then we have a booty style construction. This is the boot here. If you don't love booty style constructions, or if you constantly struggle to get your feet into shoes like this, you would want to consider that, but I don't think it's going to be an issue for a lot of folks. That will be very niche. But when it comes to just general lockdown and security, the shoe does a pretty good job. And why I like this model too is you don't always necessarily have to crank the laces super tight to get good security. Because we do have this booty construction, there's not a ton of stretch to it. So it is one of those models that's pretty good at like setting and forgetting and then just slipping on for your sessions. Also, when it comes to the laces here, you have 5 core eyelets that go up, all utilizing that Flywire tech to help give you security. The upper in this shoe is like a moderate level of breathability. It's not the lightest weight shoe on the market, but it's also not the heaviest. In the Nike Metcon 10, you have a mesh upper with haptic overlays. It feels a little bit heavier. You also have a padded boot back here. Now, when it comes to the boot heights, obviously you can see a difference here. There is a pretty substantial difference between the Free Metcon 6 and the Nike Metcon 10's boot and how high that comes up on the ankle. If you are prone to heel slip in shoes with lower profile ankles, that would be something to consider in the Nike Metcon 10. But all that said, when it comes to security, the Metcon 10 does a really good job at locking down the foot. You have 5 core eyelets that go up. This middle eyelet has a slightly more aggressive feel to it. It's a bigger eyelet to give you lateral support and security. And when it comes to the breathability comparison to the Free Metcon 6, the Metcon 10 definitely breathes a little bit less. The next difference to consider is the outsole treads and how you're going to be training, because this can influence which model I would suggest based on how you plan to use these shoes. In the Nike Free Metcon 6, you have a rubber tread that goes throughout the forefoot, midfoot, and heel. However, you do have breaks up here in the forefoot where you can see some exposed foam. If you are somebody that is regularly training outdoors or doing heavy work on turf with sled pushes, you would want to consider potentially going with the Metcon 10 over the Free Metcon 6. I've had a pair of Free Metcon 6s break from heavier sled pushes. The forefoot kind of split apart. Now that isn't going to be an issue for everybody, so don't think that the shoe is going to instantly break down on you if you're using it for that. But there are specific cases where I generally don't love the Free Metcon 6 just from a long-term durability context. But from a general grip standpoint, this model does do a good job, so I wouldn't stress that too much. The Nike Metcon 10 has a full rubber tread. You have a few grooves up here in the forefoot to add to the overall flexibility up here. And then you have this cutout here where you could see that Hyperlift insert. And then you have these triangle lugs. This shoe does a really good job at gripping. And if you do want a shoe that's going to be a little bit more durable for cross training and CrossFit, that's where the Metcon 10's outsole can take an edge. But in general, both these shoes do a good job with grip. There are just certain contexts where you're probably not going to want to wear one over the other depending on how you're using them. The fourth major difference to note between these shoes is just their general sizing and fit in their heel to toe drop. In the Metcon 10, you have a heel to toe drop of 4 millimeters. In the Free Metcon 6, I believe it sits around 5 millimeters. That is not disclosed on Nike's site, but the prior models have been 5 millimeters, so I'm assuming this model also sits around that. Now, it's not the biggest difference, but where I think the difference lies is just how each shoe fits on the foot with its arch construction and just general toe box. In the Free Metcon 6, believe it or not, we actually, I think, have a more spacious fit in the toe box. The taper isn't as aggressive on the lateral side of the forefoot, and you have a little bit more upper volume here through the forefoot and midfoot. In the Nike Metcon 10, you have that much more lower profile feel with the upper construction. Feels a little bit more athletic. It kind of feels like a cleat in some ways, which I know some folks really like from Nike. And then both of these shoes have arches. Now, I do think the arch is a little bit more pronounced in the Metcon 10, so you'll definitely want to consider that as well. The Free Metcon 6 does have an arch, but it's not nearly as aggressive, or at least the material is not as dense, so it doesn't feel as aggressive. That said, now let's break down the performance differences between these shoes. All right, so performance-wise, which model is going to be better for lifting? The outright edge goes to the Nike Metcon 10. If your main goal is maximal stability and you are primarily training pretty heavy, so think anything over 350 pounds on squats, deadlifts, or you're doing a lot of CrossFit workouts with a lot of heavy strength movements programmed, the Metcon 10 is going to take the edge here. The React foam is going to be a little bit more dense, and that Hyperlift insert is going to give you more stability throughout the heel. The midfoot of the shoe is also a little bit less flexible, so it does give you a slightly more grounded feel when training. In the Nike Free Metcon 6, you can definitely hit some heavier lifts in this model. For example, I've seen folks put up over 400 pounds in this shoe. Now, would it necessarily be my first pick for that? No. I would say the sweet spot with this shoe is honestly anything under 365 pounds on squats and deads and lower, or if you're doing machine work and you're in that more moderate range, this shoe stability will be plenty fine. For most lifters, I would not necessarily stress this unless you are wanting a shoe strictly for strength and power movements, go Nike Metcon 10. But if you're somebody that likes to do a little bit of everything and you're not going crazy heavy, the Free Metcon 6 will work. Now, which model is better for CrossFit? Now, that's where the edge is going to go to the Nike Metcon 10 for the most part. Now, the Free Metcon 6 can work for CrossFit. However, what I would say is look at your gym's programming and see what is more regularly programmed in your workouts. Do you have WODs more regularly programmed with a lot of jumping and short interval runs? If so, the Free Metcon 6 will feel a little bit better, so it might be worth picking up to keep in rotation with other pairs. If your gym programs a lot of heavier strength and power movements with rope climbs and movements that are going to beat up the upper construction of your shoe, the Metcon 10 would be your best bet. Do you need both shoes? Not necessarily, but it wouldn't be a terrible idea having a couple of shoes in your lineup if you do want shoes dialed for very specific things to give you maximal comfort and performance. But most shouldn't need to do that if that's not necessarily in your budget. Which model is better for cross training? I'm going to give the edge actually to the Nike Free Metcon 6 here. Now, do keep in mind when I say cross training, I am blending classes, HIIT, athletic style workouts all into one thing. The Metcon 10 can work for that, but with the heel back here just being a little bit more blocky, as you can see, it kind of sticks out, has that Hyperlift insert. Anything where you're going to be having a bit more heel contact, that's where the shoe can start to fall short. Also, with the lower profile upper and the narrower toe box, it can also feel a little bit limiting for certain foot anatomies. The Free Metcon 6, I think, is just going to give you a slightly more safer bet when it comes to that style of training, so that would be worth a look in my opinion. If your main ask is for classes, some strength, some HIIT, and then maybe some short runs, pre or post workout or programmed into your workouts. Now, which model is better for short runs? Nike Free Metcon 6, hands down. This model you can do a couple miles in, and it's not the most uncomfortable shoe. Honestly, I find the sweet spot in this model to be anywhere from 400 meters to 1200 meter intervals. The Nike Metcon 10, it is better for running compared to the 8, 9, and 7, but it is definitely a shoe that you're going to want to keep on the shorter end. So I think 400 to 800 meters tops in this shoe, and preferably on a treadmill or assault runner. That's what I think is most comfortable. If you're a heel striker and running outside in the shoe, God bless you. Which model is better for daily wear? Again, Nike Free Metcon 6, hands down. Better upper construction for that ask, way more comfortable, and just generally a better ride for all day wear. The Nike Metcon 10 can just be a little bit too low profile and narrow in my opinion for all day wear, and it's just not the most comfortable for walking. All right, now let's break down the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the Free Metcon 6 and the Nike Metcon 10. Both these shoes are size 10 US, 11.85 in the Nike Metcon 10. In the Free Metcon 6, we have a weight of 10.65 ounces. The heel to toe drop of the Free Metcon 6 allegedly sits around 5 millimeters, and the Nike Metcon 10 allegedly sits around 4 millimeters. Both of these shoes have thin foam removable insoles. The upper volume in the Metcon 10 is a little bit lower though, so take that into account if you use custom orthotics and inserts. All right, now let's quickly go over the construction differences between these two shoes. Both models have extended outsole layers that wrap up and bias the medial forefoot. When we look at the upper construction, the Free Metcon 6, we have a lighter weight mesh that runs throughout the forefoot into the midfoot, and then back here in the heel we have a padded mesh. The boot does come up here a little bit more, so you do get a bit more support here with this model. You have an external heel tab, and then you also have a synthetic overlay around the toe box here. When we look at the midfoot of the Free Metcon 5, we have 5 core eyelets that go up with flywire holding you in, and then you have that booty style construction, so there is no separate tongue in this shoe. In the Nike Metcon 10, you have a mesh upper that goes throughout the forefoot into the midfoot. You have some haptic overlays at the forefoot here on the medial side, and then you also have a padded mesh boot. Looking at the midfoot of this shoe, you have 5 core eyelets that go up. This middle eyelet is a little bit more aggressive, and you can feel that it's a little bit more rigid here on the medial and lateral side. Don't give you additional lateral lockdown. The tongue is a padded mesh, and there's also a tucking pocket up here to help stick your laces into. The midsole in the Metcon 10 is built with the Nike React foam. Back here in the heel, you have a TPU plate for handstand push-up support, and then you also have some rubber overlays here from the outsole extending up on the medial and lateral side. Then looking at the outsole, full rubber tread. You can see a cutout here in the heel where you can see the hyperlift, some cutouts here in the midfoot, and then grooves up here in the forefoot for additional flexibility. In the Nike Free Metcon 6, you have the Free Tech midsole that runs throughout. It is a little bit softer with its density compared to the Metcon 10. The foam back here in the heel is a little bit more dense for stability purposes, and there's a little bit more bevel to it. Looking at the outsole, you have a full rubber tread with some cutouts and grooves. Once again, be very conscious of this. This can pick up rocks outdoors, and if you're putting a lot of stress into this shoe's forefoot with heavy sleds and stuff, you will want to be mindful of the durability. Both shoes, once again, have removable insoles, but if you have additional questions on the construction, drop a comment down below. All right, y'all, that's of this comparison of the Nike Free Metcon 6 versus the Nike Metcon 10. For more versatility bias, go Free Metcon 6. For more stability and CrossFit bias, go Metcon 10. If you have additional questions on these shoes and how they can line up for your training, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.